Alcohol plays a complex role in North Korea. On the one hand, it is an element of social customs and rituals, and on the other, it is an escape from daily hardships as well as an indicator of social tensions and inequalities. Social consumption includes both industrially produced spirits and homemade drinks, which gain popularity where regular industrial supplies are lacking and informal trade fills logistical gaps. The regime publicly calls alcohol abuse a political cancer, and sporadic reprimands and actions against drunken officials indicate that the authorities fear a loss of discipline and reputation among state functionaries. Among available drinks, local vodka and soju produced in domestic factories stand out. They are available in hotels for foreign guests and in shops intended for selected residents. Makgeolli and regional alcohols made from ginseng or pine cones appear on tables as traditional specialties, but their availability is strongly dependent on the region and the harvest season, which determines the rhythm of local consumption. In practice, many people turn to cheap homemade alcohol or drinks obtained at local markets because industrial distributions are often irregular, and imported products are mainly intended for elites and tourist venues. Drinking culture in rural areas differs from that in cities. Where fuel and resources are limited, fermented beverages are prepared at home, and these processes have both a practical and a social dimension. For many residents, alcohol is shared at moments of celebration, at the end of the harvest, and during family ceremonies, sustaining traditional practices despite economic and political pressure. Smuggling trade with China and local Jangmadang markets have enriched the range of alcohols in some border areas, creating alternative supply circuits and affecting prices and availability. In cities, especially in selected hotels and venues serving foreigners, a more extensive alcohol menu is served, intended to craft a desired image of hospitality and normality. Monetary and social dependence is visible where prolonged stress, low incomes, and a lack of prospects drive individuals to use alcohol more often as a coping mechanism. The lack of available addiction treatment programs and limited medical support in many areas means that alcohol abuse often remains untreated and stigmatized in local communities. Informal drinking practices also include camaraderie rituals among workers and officials, where shared consumption cements group relations but can also lead to abuses and workplace conflicts. The sale of alcohol in exchange bureaus and shops for selected citizens is an instrument of control, because preferential access to better drinks can serve as a reward and confirmation of social status. Home distilleries and fermenting operations, often located in domestic spaces, use traditional recipes and local ingredients, creating a varied but informal market for beverages. Young people and students face peer pressure, and the lack of alternative forms of entertainment in many places means that alcohol becomes one of the few ways to spend free time after work. In official narratives, the authorities recommend moderation, but at the same time permit social drinking in contexts that do not undermine order and the party's authority, creating an ambivalent regulatory stance. When scandals involving intoxicated officials occur, leadership responds with public reprimands and swift dismissals, demonstrating that alcohol can be treated as a sign of a lack of discipline. The psychological consequences of chronic consumption include reduced professional capacity, escalating family tensions, and an increased risk of illness in communities with weak healthcare systems. In crisis situations, such as interruptions in food supply, alcohol sometimes serves as an auxiliary currency or a commodity that can be traded at markets, confirming its economic function beyond being a beverage. Accounts from defectors and statements by those who have left the country indicate that drinking can be both a means of social integration and a risk for prematurely destabilizing family structures. Alcohol abuse also affects public safety. Drunk driving and brawls in small communities are described as situations that escalate local conflict and burden law enforcement. For women, alcohol has an additional social dimension because in many areas their drinking is judged more harshly, creating a double burden of norms and hindering access to therapeutic support. In response to visible abuses, local authorities can organize disciplinary campaigns, combining preventive actions with repressive sanctions against the most exposed individuals. One consequence of the lack of health regulations is the low availability of standard tests and medical therapies, so the long-term outcomes of alcohol abuse are poorly monitored and treated. The role of alcohol in political and social rituals means its use is often hidden or minimized in official reports, which hampers assessment of the problem scale and the planning of health policies. The social costs of alcoholism include lost productivity, increased household spending on treatment, and the breakdown of some family ties, which translates into a lower quality of life in affected regions. The availability of imported alcohol is in practice reserved for those connected with diplomacy, cross-border trade, and party elites, creating a clear consumption divide in society. Faced with international sanctions and internal economic constraints, a substitution practice is developing in which local producers experiment with recipes and methods to maintain beverage supplies. The prospect of treating alcoholism is complex because it requires both a change in social norms and investment in healthcare and access to therapy, which is difficult to achieve under financial and political constraints.